See, in Christendom, we can create a Christian state where we can name what religion is going to be there. I do know that by study of history, when I look at the Roman Empire, and when I look that it became a religious state, okay, when it became a church state, I believe it served, in my opinion, just by reading history. You go back and read it if you want to. Bob, you can check me here. Jen, any of you can check me. But did it make the church better or worse? Did the Christian leaders, did the ecclesiastical leaders of that day become more like Christ and influence the rest of the Roman Empire to be more like Christ? Or did the Roman Empire influence the ecclesiastical leaders to be more secular? And I believe if you go and you read history, if you look at anything, okay, the selling of indulgences, this is the very reason, you know, while, the selling of indulgences is the very reason why, who was, nailed his 63, Martin Luther nailed his thesis to the door of the church because he said, this is not right. He says, all y'all are doing is trying to make money. So if I say to you, I don't know if Christendom is like Christian nationalism. I don't know. But I do know that church states, if you read the history of it, have become more indulgent, okay? Christian church states have become more, their ecclesiastical leaders have become more secular when I read history. So if I was to say, is it good or bad? I don't know, okay? But I'm not seeing, I've seen it become more corrupt, and the ecclesiastical leadership become more corrupt and more secular through this. What does it say? Power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay, and when you have undeniable authority and not in checks and balances, then you need to understand that there's going to be things wrong. We see it in the Christian church today, especially, I say in the Christian church, in America, we see it day after day after day. We see ministers and who have allowed either pride or greed or some other imperfection in their life to be played out on a world stage because they did not check themselves. They did not, they were not kept, you know, I don't want to say under prayer, but accountable. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you so much. Jeannie said, okay, I see where you're going. Okay, so Christendom, we see, let me focus a little bit on the differences. Noella Druin, good to have you this evening. The key differences between what we're talking about tonight, for those of you who have just joined, we're talking about Christianity. Is it a lifestyle for you or is it a temporary fix? And so I want to start out by discussing Christianity versus Christendom. Okay, so here's the thing. It's Christianity. The focus of Christianity is on individual faith and an individual relationship with God. I know we do this corporately, but it's still an individual. The Bible tells us all that there will come a day of accountability, and nobody else in that church, your pastor, nobody else is going to be standing up there. You will be accountable for yourself. And you can't stand up there and say, well, my pastor said this and my pastor said this. You have the Bible, the same Bible that your pastor reads out of. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your pastor, what he teaches. All I'm saying is you are responsible for your understanding of who God is and the purpose of God, okay, and the will of God, all right? Now, next thing I say is that the focus on Christendom is a collective culture. It has to do with institutions and political influence of Christians. That's where we're at. How does Christianity influence, and I've even spoke about this before, how does Christianity influence the seven mountains? You know, you've heard that say before. How do we influence culture? How do we influence movies? How do we influence education? How do we do that? That is Christendom. That is not Christianity. Is it wrong? No, I want you to understand the differences between the two. Because when I say, are you living a Christian lifestyle? You can't say, well, I'm part of this institution. I'm part of this political party. I'm part of this Christian movement. I'm part of that. That's Christendom. What I'm asking about is, are you in a relationship, in a good relationship with Jesus Christ? Is your faith where it needs to be? I'm not asking you what you're involved in. I'm not asking you, do you teach this class? Do you lead this group? Do you volunteer in VBS? That's not what I'm talking about. That is not a Christian lifestyle. That is being part of a Christian influence on the kingdom. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. I know I'm waiting for Bob to pop something on here. I know, Bob, you're scratching your head. And Jeannie, you're tracking with me a little bit. And Noella, I don't know anything about you, so I can't guess what you're thinking right now, okay? But let's talk about the nature of these two. Well, let's talk about the scope of it for a minute. In the scope of Christianity, we look at it as being globally and timeless, okay? Think about this different. Now, Christendom is historically specific, and it's often European-centered, all right? So when I talk about Christianity, Christianity is timeless. There's no beginning, there's no end. There's the Alpha and there's the Omega. He is the beginning, He is the end. God is outside of time, God is outside of space, God is outside of matter, okay? He created all of it, all right? But then when I talk about Christendom, Christendom takes place within time, okay? Universities start at a specific time. People graduate at a specific time. You teach classes at a specific time. Okay. You create Bibles. You create other things. That's matter. Matter is created within a certain time frame. It's created within a certain space. Okay. And so many times things that take place in Christendom are historically specific. It took place between here and here. Whereas God, there is no here and here. Okay, Christianity, there is no here and here, because it is our lives are centered on Christ, who is timeless. Okay, whereas Christendom has historically specific periods for things that take place within Christendom. Okay, now the origin. Here's the good one. All right, y'all can jump on this bandwagon with me, or y'all can shut it off right now. Okay, what is the origin of Christianity? It was founded by Jesus Christ. Anybody disagree with that? Christianity was founded by Jesus Christ. It is based on his teachings. It is based on his disciples retelling his teachings. And it is based on Paul, who had interaction with Christ and was taught and became a disciple of Jesus Christ when he was changed on the road to Damascus. And so all of these things that we see, that this changing of people, it is about the teachings of God. We understand the 4 synoptic gospels, okay? Well, actually 3 of them are really only synoptic. But anyway, the 4 gospels, talk about the life and times of Jesus Christ. And then we start talking about how that the disciples begin to go out and win certain regions, okay, and set up certain churches and begin to understand how the teachings and explain the teachings of Jesus Christ. And then we go through certain letters that Paul wrote to different churches and to different people and to certain followers, Timothy, Titus, Philemon. We talk about that. And then we need to understand at the end of the New Testament, we have the book of Revelation that talks about the future times. It talks about the actual nature of Jesus Christ. Understand that Jesus Christ, the 4 Gospels, teaches about his lifetime when he was here on earth. But many people don't understand that the majority of the time that he was here on earth, everything that he said was, I say this because the Father said it to me. I do this because the Father told me to do this. And what he was doing was he was representing God here on earth. If you want to understand who Jesus Christ is, the nature of Jesus Christ, you go to the book of Revelation, which teaches you a lot more about Jesus Christ. We think about Jesus Christ who loved us and died on the cross. Revelation teaches about a wild banshee who's coming back on a horse with a sword and annihilating people. That's a wide range of different. We ain't talking about Lone Ranger and Tonto here, buddy. We're talking about some behind whooping. Okay, gonna open a can. All right, so. Christianity was founded by Jesus Christ. However, Christianity under Constantine, as far as Christendom go, was institutionalized under Constantine. and then other subsequent Christian rulers. That is what became Christendom, was the organization of Christianity with all of its rules, regulations, institutions, training academies to further certain thought, certain doctrine, certain scaffolding of thinking, and to move that along. And I guarantee you, if I talk to somebody for at least 30 minutes about Christianity, I can pretty much guess where their influence came from and where maybe they went to school or what they were raised up as. Now, moving on. The usage. Christianity is a widely recognized and practiced religion, okay? However, Christendom is less commonly used in everyday language, but it's often more historical or cultural in context.